My name's Tim Middleton. I'm a project manager with BookNet Canada. I get to introduce all these fine people to my left. We're here to talk about their company's most recent innovations. We have representatives from BitLit, Kobo, and new iOS app Litzy down at the end. So I'll just introduce Mary Alice Alcott.
That's a fabulous name.
Shannon, I call her Shannon, is the Vice President of Content for BitLit, creators of the Shelfie app, where she negotiates with publishers to make their titles available through the app. In the last 3 years, she has grown the Shelfie catalog to 1,300 publishers with 250,000 ebooks and 20,000 audiobooks, including HarperCollins, Hachette, and Macmillan. She loves working at the crossroads of publishing and technology, like all of us, and can't wait to see what the next 5 years have in store. Please welcome Mary.
Hi, everybody. As Tim said, I'm Mary Alice, and I'm the VP Content for Shelfie. Some of you may know us as BitLit. Some of you may know us as Shelfie. We rebranded the app about a year ago to Shelfie as it was more consumer-friendly. If you have a contract with us, it's still with BitLit, so we kind of go by both. We created the app that allows publishers to offer an ebook or an audiobook edition to readers who own a print copy. Last year at Tech Forum, I introduced the idea of bundling generally, but today I'm going to be talking more specifically about the tech behind Shelfie, what we've done in the last year, and where we're headed. I've built this presentation by looking at the problems we've tried to solve as we've grown over the last 3 years, because that's really how I think any app develops. It's interesting to frame these changes as the problem that any app is doing, because I think that as consumers, we often forget that that's why innovation happens in apps. Like when Instagram introduced their web interface, they were trying to solve a particular problem. And that's how we innovated at Shelfie as well. So when we first introduced Shelfie, it was with the idea that a reader should be able to download an ebook edition of a book they own in print. Most programs like this, be they in-store, direct from publisher, or online, require some kind of proof of purchase, a photo of your print receipt or the actual receipt itself, or the record in the POS system. But we wanted to do things differently, so we turned to computer vision. Computer vision, and this is pretty simplistic because I'm actually not in computer vision in any way, is the science and technology of machines that see. So it allows for the building of artificial systems that obtain information from images. For our purposes, we obtain information from photos uploaded in the app by our users, either of their bookshelves or of singular books. But if you've ever used the panorama function on your iPhone, then you've also used some pretty impressive computer vision technology. In its infancy, Shelfie was a simple tool. The basic tech behind claiming is as follows. A reader takes a photo of a book which we match to the image we receive from the publisher, so that's visual matching. And a reader then takes a photo of their name written on the copyright page, which we match using OCR, or optical character recognition. The reader is then prompted to download the book at the price the publisher has set. So that's all pretty easy. Not much has changed about the claim system since we launched, but we did have a problem. How does a reader find out if a book is eligible? When we first launched, I really love it. Anyway, when we first launched, we had about 10 publishers and maybe 2,500 ebooks, which is really not a lot. The problem is that we simply didn't have enough books for a reader to be guaranteed to find their one true love. We knew we needed to create the ability for a reader to quickly and easily find out what books they had that were eligible to be purchased. Enter Shelfie. With Shelfie, a reader takes a photo of their bookshelf, and we identify for them all of the books on their shelf and let them know which titles are available to bundle. How we do that is a pretty snazzy piece of machine learning. So you, the reader, have taken a photo of the books on your shelf, which is then uploaded to our servers. Your name is Mark. You really like narwhals. Using computer vision, we then break the image into segments that we estimate to be individual book spines. We do this using an algorithm that looks for rectangles that conform to our expectations about what a book spine looks like in terms of their edges, consistent colors, and orientations relative to each other. In a well-captured photo, we're able to detect 99% of the books on a shelf. In a typical photo, about 90%. The reason for the difference is the quality of the photo. So in the office, we take perfect photos. But out in the real world, readers take photos where the lighting isn't perfect or there's a slight blur. In the photograph here, this is a perfect photo, you can see that the computer has recognized all the spines, whether horizontal or vertical. So now we have a bunch of segments that we think are book spines. We attempt to match them against previous book spines that we've seen and identified. This is essentially the same tech that I described earlier when we match a cover in our database to a user photo. Currently, we're able to match the top 25,000 most popular books, which covers about 60% of all readers' bookshelves. That's a crazy fact. If you want to imagine how this works, when you get home tonight, look at your bookshelf, step back, blur your eyes, and you'd still be able to recognize a vast majority of those books without being able to read the spines. We can probably all tell that most of the spines in this photo are Twilight, though there are a few I'm less sure of at the end. After we've matched the spines we've seen before, we then send the remaining spines through a junk filter to filter out any rectangular shapes that might not be a book. The edge of your bookshelf, patterns and wallpaper behind a bookshelf, and we filter that out with a high certainty. And then we send the remaining spines through OCR. We take a more detailed look at each spine, detect where the text is, and then read it. We then match that text against titles in a database that we receive from Bowker. So we've subscribed to Bowker's entire list, so we're matching against millions and millions of titles. In order to evaluate the quality of our OCR signal during research and development, we ground truthed our reader by doing a manual evaluation of 500 books and then compared it against our own system. OCR isn't a magic bullet, though, because I think in an effort to make book spines stand out, fonts are often selected that are actually pretty difficult for computers to read. So anything that we can't recognize through these first steps, we then send to Mechanical Turks. I really like Mechanical Turks because it's a hilarious name. It sounds like advanced AI technology, but all it actually means is that we send our spines to a person to read and have them type in the title of the book for a few cents. There are some problems that you genuinely need a human to solve. If we've misidentified a book, users can reject that identification or remove that book from their list, and we use that signal to improve our recognition overall. Users do this by QAing the book, essentially. What this means is they click on a photo of their Shelfie and are then able to match the spine to the cover of the book we've detected. If the book is correct, they click yes. If the book is incorrect, they send it back for review. As we see more and more book spines, we're able to skip many of the steps post-spine matching, allowing for quicker reader results. So how quickly do we process a Shelfie? For any of the books that we recognize using visual feature matching or OCR, the results are less than a minute. For less common books or hard-to-read books that have to go to a Mechanical Turk, they generally take between 1 to 15 minutes. Once complete, readers can then start exploring their eligible ebooks and audiobooks in the app. What I love about the Shelfie function is that readers often rediscover their books. Whenever I take a Shelfie, I'm reminded of the books that I purchased and then forgot about. Thus, for publishers, Shelfie serves as a backlist sale discovery tool, while bundling allows publishers to gain incremental sales and learn the name and email address of people who have bundled their books. So after launching Claiming and Shelfie, we started to think about how readers engaged with the app. So one of the things that apps are always concerned about is being sticky, getting people to come back. We built a great tool, but we wanted Shelfie to be a place where readers could hang out. So we built in following, messages, and favorites. We linked into Goodreads so that readers could import their full list of titles, and we linked into Facebook so readers could find their friends. We wanted our readers to not only engage with the content, but also with each other. So we solved the bundling problem, the finding your books problem, the engaging with the app problem, and that brings me to the nut we're currently trying to crack, which is discovery and recommendations. Once we had tens of thousands of readers taking Shelfies, we realized that the data of what was on people's shelves would be indicative of what other readers would be interested in reading. So let's say I have 4 books, and Tim has 5 books, and Shannon has another 5 books. Well, then I would want to know what the title they have is that I don't have. Furthermore, we know the books that are actually on our readers' shelves, rather than knowing only the titles they've purchased. So for years, Amazon's recommendation engine has been predicated by people who bought this also bought, but that includes books you bought as gifts for your mom or what have you. And then Goodreads, which is predicated by the assumption that you've self-declared those books. So you're not going to put your Twilight books into Goodreads. So we started thinking about recommendations. The best recommendations are built on friends, family, and coworkers. When I did an informal survey of my friends a few weeks ago, unless the person worked in the publishing industry, the uniform answer was, I don't buy a book unless someone I know and trust has told me I'll like it. We heard earlier today about the millennial generation's tendency to spend their money carefully after much research, and I think this fact is indicative of that trend. In this survey from the Codex Group, we can see that between 2010 and 2012, personal recommendations are what was on the rise. And in a Pew study from 2011, 64% of those 16 and older said that they get book recommendations from friends, family, and coworkers. The other sources that were mentioned in the same study had percentages of between 20 to 30%. So personal recommendations were far and away the winner. So we built our recommendations on personal recommendations. In December, we introduced to the app the feature of Found on Shelves With. We assumed that readers subconsciously shelve books together that they deem have an affinity to each other. While some users may not have put much thought into the manner they shelve their items, at scale, enough users will have grouped items in meaningful ways such that we can learn from those patterns and produce more relevant recommendations. We also look not just at all their shelves, but at titles that have been grouped closer together, and more weight is given to books that are shelved directly adjacent. I was a bit skeptical of this at first because I didn't think that I really had any rhyme or reason to how I shelved my books, but then when I went home I realized that I generally shelve books by the same author together, I always keep my poetry in one place, and that I tend to keep genres closer together. I'm sure almost all of us have a cookbook shelf. So if we look at the book Nom Nom Paleo, we can see that I might be really interested in Against the Grain, Well-Fed, and Well-Fed too. Another good example is State of Wonder, which is one of my favorite authors. When we delve down on this book, we can see The Goldfinch, Night Circus, and Bel Canto, all of which are books that I've thought about reading. And the one thing I really like about Shelfie is because it knows all of your books, it's not going to recommend a book that you already own. There's also a way that we can weight books within the recommendations. Part of the insightfulness of the recommendation is that we can assume with a book that's ubiquitous, like Harry Potter, that its presence on a shelf isn't as informative because it is on so many bookshelves. Harry Potter being on a bookshelf just isn't a distinguishing feature of your bookshelf, and it doesn't tell us much about you as a reader. Just as in publishing we have the big five, on reader shelves we have the big four. That's Lord of the Rings, Harry Potter, The Hunger Games, and Game of Thrones. Seriously. That takes up the first 20. After that, we have another 10 books that probably you're not particularly surprised by. We all read Catcher in the Rye in high school. The Da Vinci Code had its huge heyday. The other aspect of discovery we're introducing is exploring other readers' bookshelves. So have you ever gone over to a friend's and found yourself transfixed by what they have on their shelves? We made it possible for our readers to experience that digitally. So I can dig down on Nom Nom Paleo and see the different users. So underneath, or just above Found on Shelves With, you can see 26 users have this book. And then I can also see other titles that that user has and what she might be reading, and I can link into another user from there, and I can kind of get lost in exploring people's shelves. Another way that a reader can explore his or her titles is through exploring their own books. So when I click on the tab for books, I can see all my books as well as my books by genre. If I click into a single genre, I can see titles that are specifically recommended to me. So I can access my personal recommendations by genre, and again, these will be titles that I haven't added to my account. And of course, I'm able to add these to a wish list. Finally, we've most recently introduced a web interface. So this allows me to explore recommendations through explore.shelfie.com. This is a reader with 256 titles on her shelf, and we can drill down on any of these titles, but I picked The Curious Incident of the Dog in the Nighttime. And here are a few books that were found on shelves with that book. What I liked about this one is that you can see that there are books you would expect and then books you wouldn't expect, like the Whistler book. Obviously, it's not a comp you're going to put on a tip sheet, but it helps you to start to build a more robust picture of who your reader is. We can also search in explore.shelfie.com by a particular title. So here's one for Catcher in the Rye, not really any surprises, and a good one for Outliers. Here's one for 15 Dogs, the most recent Giller Prize. I thought this was a really interesting mix of suggestions. Ontario features pretty heavily. And then here's one for Sisters Brothers from Anansi. So how can publishers use recommendations? Publishers who participate get access to a recommendation API when they list their titles. This means that they're able to have a website that includes things like related titles. They would also be able to recommend titles to people in their email newsletters based on titles which the user has previously purchased or expressed interest in. So imagine if a reader bundles your book and you can immediately reach out to her and tell her another book she'd be interested in based on her data. At Shelfie, we want to enable our publishers' partners to go direct in a way that is meaningful for both them and the reader. So what lies ahead? We want to be a hub for readers, a place where they can come to find recommended titles, where they can get digital editions or audiobooks of books they own in print, a place where they can talk about their favorite books. We'll continue to build features into the app that give our readers the best experience, and we'll continue promoting our mission of reading freedom across platforms. The end.
We're going to introduce Inmar Givoni. She's Vice President of Big Data at Kobo, where she leads her team in applying machine learning and big data techniques to improve and optimize e-commerce, customer satisfaction, and CRM for e-reading. Prior to joining Kobo, she worked at Microsoft Research and Altera. She's the author of numerous top-tier academic publications and patents, and a regular speaker at many big data, analytics, and machine learning events. Please welcome Inmar.
So from our internal book people, I heard that at this conference, people are expected to be entertained and that it's also a very nerdy type of crowd. And so I decided to kind of go all out on the nerd front and the nerd jokes. And this is actually a challenge for you, because if you don't laugh in the right places, you know, it's not my problem, it's you. So let's get started. So thank you to Mary Alice for sort of talking about recommendations, because it really leads nicely into my talk. I'm going to only talk about how we do recommendations at Kobo. We do a whole lot of other things with machine learning, but I wanted to kind of focus on that. And so recommendations are really important for us. As this says, it's about 23% of our purchases. We can track down to people clicking on something that we've recommended to them. And what do I mean by recommendations? So similarly to what we've heard before, there are two essential types of recommendations. So the first one is item-to-item recommendations. You can find them when you're browsing our website. You can find them when you're reading on your e-reader for a particular title you're reading, or on the app. And we also shove them into some other places. So for example, if you've searched for something on the website and we're pretty sure we know what you searched for, so there's only one or two results, we will also enrich what we show you as a search result with some of the related titles to the book you've searched for. If you're adding stuff to your shopping cart, we'll show you things that are related to the items in the shopping cart and so on. And then the second type of recommendations is the personalized recommendations, or the item-to-user recommendations. And again, you can go to the website when you're authenticated and see the things that we recommend specifically for you. Again, on the e-reader, on the app, you'll see your list of personal recommendations. And we also send out email campaigns, which in this day and age is still a really important way for us to communicate with our readers, and they engage with these communications quite a bit. So, okay, my team, and especially the recommendation team myself, will lose a lot of sleep over, how can we constantly improve our recommendation engine, and what are the things we can do to make it better. And there are a few ways to go about it. And the first one is the core algorithm, the core system that is used to compute recommendations. And there are different ways of doing it. As Mary Alice mentioned, the essential worldview of how I think about the data for computing recommendations is this big table of millions of users and millions of titles. And for every one of our users, we know which are the books that they've purchased. And so the way we can think about that is we have all of this co-purchase information. So, as a normal person, when I think about what books are, they're friends, they're like memories, they are opportunities for learning and for entertainment. But when I put on my big data / machine learning head, books are lists of people, right? So every book is the list of people that have bought this particular book. Well, I'm actually lying. The way I really think about it is high-dimensional vectors, but I don't talk about that so often. So yeah, lists of people. So if we look at this table, which I call matrix, of course, it's we can look at two books, and we can see that they have similar co-purchase information. So a lot of people seem to be buying the same two books in conjunction. And that allows us to basically compute the similarity between any two books. And for every particular book, we can say, what is the book that is the most similar to this book in our catalog? And that will be the first book that we show as a related item. And we can ask, what's the second book, third book, and so on. And that's essentially, in a nutshell, and a high level, how we compute the item to item, the related titles. So given that, let's say that we have a user, and the user has a library of books. How do we compute their personalized recommendations? Well, okay, we can do something relatively simple. We can go to the first book in their library and say, what is a related title? What's an item-to-item relationship for this book? And from that, we can generate a recommendation. We can go to the second book and generate a recommendation, and so on. And again, at a very high level, this is how we compute your personalized recommendation. So here's one thing that we did to recently innovate and improve upon our recommendation algorithm. And this went live yesterday. So, we constantly do stuff with the engine, but this is something quite recent. So obviously, if you think about it, what you read last week is a lot more important for generating recommendation than what you read a year ago, right? So there is this whole notion that we need to forget over time the things that you've read a long time ago. And we've realized that how quickly we let the algorithm forget is a very important aspect of the system. And it's something that needs to be optimized, right? How do you determine over time what is what we call the decay rate of how important a book is for generating a recommendation? And it's so important that recently we decided that not only are we going to optimize it, we're actually going to optimize it on an individual basis. So now in our system, every user have their own sort of curve of how quickly we let the algorithm forget for that particular user about things that they've bought historically and how much attention we pay to the books they've recently purchased. Okay, so that's in terms of like one simple idea of how we can improve upon the algorithm. We can also improve the recommendations through sources of data. And I thought, you know, the idea of things that you put together on the shelf, that's a really nice example of that. We don't have access to that information because it's all digital in our world. But going back to this view of all the users and all the books that they've purchased, we can actually do a lot more than just the books that they've purchased because we have more data, right? Okay, so this really calls for this type of job, but no, I'm going to stick to my camp, and we'll talk about where the data is coming from at Kobo. So we have all sorts of sources of information. So I've already mentioned that we know when customers are purchasing a particular book. And I have to stop for a minute. Like, the internet is such a crazy place, right? You search for Darth Vader credit card, and sure enough, there is one. So we know what books the customers have purchased, but we also know all of their behavioral, right? So cute. We know what kind of things they do on the website. So they go on the website and they browse and they interact with particular books on the item page and they click and so on. So all of this information is also something that we can collect. We do have access to the content of the books because, you know, we're selling the books, so we can do all sorts of natural language processing and automated text analysis to see what a book is about and understand that. And finally, we do know that people are reading and when they're reading and what they're reading. So this is all the data that we collect in our team, and we can use that data, among other things, to improve our recommendations. So going back to this view of the table, if I look at a particular cell, it's no longer just what you've purchased. So we can look at what you've purchased. We can look at what kind of stuff you've downloaded for free, because we do have a very large catalog of free books. We can look at all the stuff you've decided to preview, whether by downloading a preview or by looking on the website at our, you know, instant preview option. As I said, we can look at the stuff that you've clicked on or browsed and so on. We can look at the star ratings you might have given any particular book and feedback that you've given us on recommendations we've provided. And of course, we can see what you're actively reading and actively engaging with. And you can't quite see it, but R2-D2 here is reading iRobot, and he's got like a little tear coming out of his little nozzle. It's very, very sweet. So, so that was kind of, you know, how we can use data and multiple sources of data to continuously improve recommendations. And another aspect of improving recommendations is providing them in sort of the right context and the right time. And we have something that we call, you know, the next best read or frictionless reading, whatever we call it internally doesn't actually matter. But the idea is that we try to tell you, as you're about to finish a book, as you've finished the book, we want to tell you, okay, we think this will be the next best read for you. And we do it through email campaigns. So as we realize you finished the book, we're going to send you some emails saying, you know, this is the best next book we suggest. And we also do it on the app, on the device. You know, something will pop up saying, here are some relevant suggestions for your next read. So there's the question of how do we actually know you've finished the book. The users can tell us they finished the book if they really want to. You know, they can press a button and say that they're done with reading this book. But of course, they don't often bother doing it. And, you know, shockingly, they don't always get all the way to the end of the book. Because there's a lot of end matter, right? There's a lot of, you know, a chapter from the next book by the author, and so on and so forth. You guys probably know that stuff a lot better than me. And so in order to know what's the right time to serve that, one of the things we did in the team is we built an algorithm. We built a process that looks at the text of the book and predicts what kind of chapters are the front matter, what kind of chapters are the actual content of the book, and then what are the chapters that are not really are the end matter or not really the text of the book. And so based on that, we're able to trigger these types of events in a more timely manner. And one last comment on how we do things. So how many people are familiar with what's called A/B testing? Okay, so about half. So everything we do, we A/B test. And the idea, for those of you who are not familiar with it, is let's say that we have a brilliant new idea for how to generate related titles or item-to-item recommendations. And so we go and we write the code and we deploy it into our system. We don't actually want to trust the notion that we have brilliant ideas as much as we like our ideas. We want to test it out. And so half of our user base is going to get one set of the recommendations, and the other one is going to see a different set of recommendations for the same item. And then we're going to let it run, and over time we're going to measure how much people engage with the related titles and how much they purchase from these related titles. And at the end of the day, it's a competition between these two variants. And we're going to go with the one that actually wins. So yeah, sometimes, the reality is harsh, our brilliant ideas are awful, and we have to go back to the drawing board and think of something else, a different way to improve our recommendations. So I just wanted to give a big shout out to the team. We do a lot more than recommendations, but it's an awesome team, and they did a lot of the stuff that I've been talking about, and this is it for me. Thank you.
Next up is Todd, Lawton, and Jeff LeBlanc. They started Out of Print Clothing in 2010. Their mission was to redefine the way books bring people together. To spread the joy of reading, Out of Print's one-for-one give back has donated more than 1.7 million books to communities in need. Their latest venture is Litzy, a free literary social community iOS app.
I think what we'd like to do today is to tell you a little bit about our experience with readers and what we've learned through dressing readers for the last 6 years and how that's helped us understand book discovery and apply it to a new business called Litsy. I don't know how many people actually know of Out of Print, but it was started 6 years ago. It's a little confusing on our logo. It says established 1984. It was actually a throwback to when Jeff and I met in the 2nd grade in the Northwest. So that has confused some people, so that's clear. So Out of Print started as a very simple idea. How do we make an emotional connection with readers that maybe wasn't happening in the market before it existed? And our idea was to look to fashion and to other passions that people have and how those passions are merchandised and lived through the things we wear and carry. Our shirts feature iconic book cover art, and the t-shirt, the graphic t-shirt, is the perfect conversation starter. So instead of thinking of Out of Print as a t-shirt company, we really, from day one, thought of it as a community builder and a conversation company. If we stopped at t-shirts, we would not be here today. We would not be probably I think we're probably the first apparel company on stage at this conference. But because we thought of it as a way to bring readers together through that physical statement, we are now in a position where we can use that emotional connection and the community that we built over the years to bring that way of discovering books to a digital platform. And that's an iOS app called Litzy, which Jeff will explain.
So what is Litzy? As you can see by these cascading iPhones, it is an iOS app. We're a community, a social community for readers, and we've been in beta for a little over a month now, so we're excited to share what we are and what we've learned to date. At its essence, for Litzy, what we're really trying to do is tap into readers' passion for books, because we've learned it out of print. We're really trying to redefine how people are sharing and experiencing books. We have two inspirations, really, when we were thinking about the idea for Litzy. And the first one is, I don't know how many of you go into an independent bookstore and you see one of those shelf talkers or a staff pick. And we found ourselves personally drawn to those great, kind of short, insightful notes about a book that's compelling to as a staff pick. Same as a librarian recommendation or a word-of-mouth recommendation from a friend. The other inspiration we took was you're reading a book that you love, and you scroll something and is marginalia in the book. You love a quote or a character or a passage. So we took those two things together, and we wanted to make that concept, bring it together in an app, make it digital, make it fun, and build a community where books make friends. So who is this community? Well, the community really is a combination of readers, like all of us, people in the book trade, so that can be bookstores, librarians, publishers, authors. And then we also like to think of people that have a voice in books, but might do so on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter, or people like celebrities. So we wanted to bring all these people together in a community, and we wanted it to be a place where everyone had a voice. And the core experience in Litzy is sharing what we call a book moment. So a book moment is you're reading, you love a quote, and again, you love a character. You wanted to review a book. What we wanted to do is give a really simple, fun, and easy way to share these book moments. And these book moments appear in a feed, just like it would for Instagram or Twitter or Facebook. So it's very familiar social features. We wanted to give the reader also an ability with these social features to tag, to add images, to add character to the post. And when you're scrolling through this feed, you can react. Litsy is intended to start conversations about books and intended to promote discovery. And a cool thing that we're really excited about is you can measure your impact on the community. So we have something that we call Litfluence. So Litfluence is your measure of your book print on your community. So as you post and people react to your posts, you get a measure of how you're influencing others. Are you introducing new books to people and your friends? Are they engaging with you? So in a sense, it's a measure of engagement. The one way that people have described it so far, so we have a community of thousands already in beta using it, and the way people have described it is we're sort of like Instagram and Twitter for books.
So from out of print, we learned, and it's been mentioned, been discussed today, how important, conversation is and word of mouth in discovery of books. And when we looked at developing Litzy, we really thought back to our experience with readers through out of print. And we wanted to make the experience simple, fun, and rewarding. In the same way that, when you put on a t-shirt, it's a very simple, thing that you do. It's comfortable to you. You're out with a fun-looking shirt and someone comments, you're feeling good about yourself because you look cool. It's supporting something you really care about. And then someone rewards you with a compliment, and that starts this cycle. You want to wear more shirts like that to get that same feedback. So when we put it into an app, we looked at all the things that how can we keep people coming back, keep people posting, reacting to other posts, and going down that rabbit hole to discover more books and have the immediate usefulness of being able to find a book that looks interesting because someone who's a trusted source recommended it or put a great quote, and to be able to organize that in a way that's like super quick. And it's all backed by a book database that can give more insight into the book, the summary, other moments that were shared to that book that become like a collective marginalia. And so the reward factor happens in multiple ways. You get immediate reaction from the community when someone responds to a post, a book that you've spent maybe a week reading that you really care about. You have something to say. You can say it any time you want, whenever you want, because it's a mobile device. It's probably sitting right next to you on your bed when you're reading that book. But that conversation lives on underneath that book in that collective marginalia. So it might be something that is read months ago and posted months ago, but that conversation can still come up as other people are going down the feed on that book profile page. And from different user standpoints, it's very rewarding for the user. It's very rewarding for publishers too, who can have a voice, who can put special insider information about the book, almost like the director's cut, that used to happen when people had DVDs. And that this whole way of thinking is creating that discovery loop that keeps people coming back and finding new books and posting more.
So it's been really fun to watch this in the wild. As we mentioned, we've been in beta for a little over a month. And this is actually a snapshot of someone's Litfluence. This is our Litfluence screen, I guess. And 42, we start every user with 42, which is a nod to one of our favorite books. Some people got it. There we go. So we wanted to share a few learnings from the initial part of the platform, and I think it relates a lot to what we've been hearing over and over in these other talks about the power of personal book recommendations, social reward, and so there are 5 main things. So the first one is that Litzy is more than reviews, and so I think 2/3 of our posts on the platform are not formal reviews. It's people who are sharing book moments. So I think there's an unmet need out there for readers who want to share something other than a review, and we're helping to meet that need. It's also interesting that those posts, the non-reviews, get the highest reaction on the platform. So the traditional reviews, while they get reaction, aren't as positive as the non-reviews. The second thing is that discovery happens. So as you see in Instagram and Twitter and other social platforms, social does create engagement, but discovery is happening on this platform. What we're trying to do is bring that social feature, and if you connect it to a book, you're now kind of connecting that discovery to add to shelf to purchase. You're bringing that one step closer. We've seen people adding on average 2 books for every post, and the active users are adding, in the last month have added about 25 books to stacks as a result of discovery. The third piece is that sharing books is rewarding, so that you were generating reaction from these posts. People are getting likes and comments and stack ads. So if you post something, you can see how you've directly influenced someone's stack, whether they marked it to read. So on average, we're seeing about 7 reactions per post. So people are getting reaction and engagement from the things they're posting these kinds of moments. The fourth piece is kind of bringing it together is, so you have reward, you have discovery, you have this connection and these conversations that are happening. And what we found is staggering. We didn't expect this, but we found is staggering in terms of the amount of engagement. So 70% of our active users return more than 2 times a week, and we have dailies that are returning, our most active users are returning more than 10 times in a day. So there's something going on here. People are excited to have these discussions about books, to share their experiences with books, and then react to others. So that's been incredibly exciting. And the last stat was surprising to us. So we launched this thing, and we intended to be primarily, just to start, just for planning. We assumed we would be in English-speaking countries. We didn't launch international versions right off the bat. We were in 70 countries within the first week. And so I think a lesson to anyone launching an app or launching a community like this is it's a global, we're in a global phenomenon now. And I think you have to be ready from day one to welcome the world into your community. So I think those were all the key points. I want to thank everyone again for having us here. Would love to answer any questions you have. And if you want to find Litzy, right now we're in iOS only, but you can get it in the App Store, and we're working on Android and web in the near future.
Questions? Anybody? The mic is up here. Don't be shy. I'm sure you're wondering, like I am, about the recommendation engines a bit. Google Mail with their embedded ads, it allows you to, as a user, to say, I'm not interested in this ad. Is that built in any of your recommendation engine? Like, I think for you too. Do you allow users to say, no, I'm not interested in that, and then improve your algorithm out of that for that user?
Not exactly for us, but what we do is we sort of watch how people interact with those recommendations. So if a book just isn't getting selected, if nobody's like, yes, I really want that.
Sorry. Did everyone hear that? Darth.
Then we'll change the recommendation based on that information. So there's sort of like a not a direct way to influence it, but an indirect way to influence it.
We provide a direct way to influence it. So from the EPD and the app, when you go to your personal recommendations, there's basically the option to discard the recommendation. And actually, we ask an additional question, which is, are you discarding it because you've already read it or you're not interested? And because it's 2 very different signals, right? One of them is, I don't like this recommendation,
Right.
don't give me similar things. And the other one is, I kind of like it, but don't show it to me because it doesn't really, like I've read it already. And we've just now launched it on the website. But it's running in A/B test mode, so you might not see it.
Okay.
As promised, test everything.
I use Goodreads.
Yep.
Why should I not use Goodreads?
Yeah.
These are
Where to start with that question? I don't think that there's any reason not to use Goodreads. I think there are lots of different recommendation platforms, and I know for us, we've tried to incorporate your Goodreads content and what's happening in Goodreads so that you can continue to use that platform, and they're not mutually exclusive. And I think that's the thing to really take away from everybody sitting here, is that none of these things are mutually exclusive. Everybody's looking for the best way of getting recommendations, and I think you have to choose. I mean, obviously, I think my recommendation is the best, but you have to choose the recommendations that are actually best for you, right? Every person here chooses the apps that they put on their phone and the things that they do in their lives and the books that they buy, and this is just another way of getting information about yourself for yourself.
But you consider them a competitor, I assume, right?
I think they're
in a way.
I guess, but I think they're also doing very different things, and like the core of Shelfie remains that you get a free ebook if you have the book, and so I'm not particularly concerned about what Goodreads is doing because they're not offering that flexibility, right? Like it's still a different company at its core. Yeah.
So I don't consider them as competition because it is for us serving a different need primarily. We share some of the same features. One place where it does become useful to have, the built-in recommendation is if you're reading on your EPD, for example. So, it's not going to be integrated with Goodreads and you want to see something nice and exciting to start reading right away. So that will be one place. Or also the fact that we have non-overlapping sources of information.
Sorry, I'm sure you have an answer as well. We noticed a lot of conversations around books happening outside of Goodreads, and we thought that if we bring the kind of best of those social communities together, dedicated to books, we'd offer a little bit different experience than maybe what we saw on Goodreads, which was largely shelving and review. We wanted a more comprehensive and fun and personal way of experiencing a book.
Well, I'm really excited. I'm trying to download it right now, your app, and it looks like the design is a little bit more engaging than the Goodreads app. Like that palette of just that like weird beige is just so boring. So thank you for for incorporating some color into your app. And
We wanted to make it fun because books are fun, and low barriers to post. So.
Yeah. And I think I think what she says is exactly right. These are definitely mutually exclusive, and I think we have a lot of Goodreads users who are on Litzy, and I think you can get value out of both platforms.